early October 2025, Russia unleashed one of its largest aerial assaults in months, a barrage that would soon spiral into a costly strategic miscalculation. What began as a show of power over Ukrainian cities became the night Moscow realized that deterrence cuts both ways. Could this be the moment when the Kremlin's energy war finally turned inward? On October 5th, Russia launched over 500 Shahed-type drones and 50 missiles, including Kinzhal hypersonics, across Ukraine. Lviv, Kharkiv, Odessa, and Zaporizhzhia were hit almost simultaneously as winter temperatures began to fall. According to Reuters and DW, Ukrainian air defenses intercepted roughly 400 targets, yet 57 drones struck infrastructure in 20 locations. 6 civilians, including a 15-year-old girl, were killed and 18 others injured. The BBC later confirmed that Lviv's power grid collapsed, forcing 2 districts into darkness. This coordinated bombardment, intended to break Ukraine's morale, instead activated a counter-strategy Kyiv had spent months refining. Only weeks earlier, President Zelensky had issued a blunt warning: if Russia sought to black out Kyiv, then Moscow would face the same fate. The Kremlin ignored him, believing Ukrainian threats were symbolic. But intelligence leaks cited by The Guardian suggested that Ukraine had secretly expanded its domestic missile programs, Flamingo and Neptune Block II, making retaliatory strikes deep inside Russia suddenly possible. That night, Ukrainian early warning systems lit up across the country. Yet unlike the first winters of the war, Ukraine's response was coordinated, not chaotic. Western-supplied Patriot and Iris-T batteries shielded the skies, while Ukrainian drones tracked Russian launch sites. Energy Minister Herman Halushchenko told NYT that for every hour of blackout here, there will be an hour of blackout there. Hours later, that promise materialized. Through the domino effect lens, Russia's attack on Ukrainian energy infrastructure set off an unexpected chain reaction. By targeting power plants, Moscow triggered Ukraine's long-prepared revenge network of drones and missiles aimed at Russian industrial hubs. The moment Russia's first cruise missiles hit Lviv, launch signals were sent from Ukrainian bases toward Belgorod and Bryansk. It was not chaos, it was counter-calculation. By dawn, videos circulating on Telegram showed explosions at Belgorod's thermal power plant and a massive fire raging at the Bryansk fuel terminal. Local authorities later admitted that over 40,000 Russians were left without heat or power as temperatures dropped below freezing. In a rare statement, Russia's energy ministry blamed technical malfunctions, a claim mocked by DW analysts as the most predictable lie of the winter. From an opportunity cost perspective, the Kremlin now faced an agonizing choice: divert resources to rebuild domestic energy facilities or continue funding frontline offensives. Defense News estimated that replacing just one thermal plant could consume funds earmarked for 3 weeks of missile production. That trade-off was Ukraine's goal to force Russia to pay for its own escalation. As smoke rose over Belgorod and Bryansk, Western intelligence picked up an unmistakable pattern. The energy war was entering a new phase where every strike had a mirror response. And if October 5th was the night Ukraine answered Moscow's attack, what came next would redefine the entire conflict. How far would Kyiv push this newfound symmetry before Moscow retaliated again? By October 6, 2025, the Kremlin's narrative of control began to unravel. While state media boasted that all Ukrainian drones had been neutralized, entire neighborhoods in Belgorod remained pitch black. The irony was undeniable. The blackout Russia had tried to inflict on Ukraine now spread across its own border towns. Could this reversal mark the first real turning point of the energy war? Zelensky's warning, once dismissed as rhetoric, was now a reality. Ukrainian retaliation came in layers. The first wave involved over 200 drones, a mix of home-built Rubaka and imported components from Western suppliers. Then came a second, more devastating phase: long-range Flamingo missiles, followed by Neptune Block II variants optimized for energy targets. Satellite footage verified by BBC Verify and Defense News confirmed multiple impact craters at Belgorod's power plant, Bryansk's transmission nodes, and a key gas compression station near Kursk. These were not random hits, they were coordinated strikes meant to paralyze. From a strategic contrast perspective, the contradiction could not be sharper. Russia's original aim to weaken Ukraine's energy capacity before winter backfired spectacularly. Instead of breaking Ukrainian morale, it exposed the Kremlin's own fragile infrastructure. A senior analyst at the Royal United Services Institute told Reuters that Russia built its war strategy on the illusion that its grid was untouchable. Ukraine just shattered that illusion in one night. This campaign also demonstrated Kyiv's new command maturity. According to Al Jazeera, Ukrainian strike planning now integrates NATO-grade intelligence feeds, including satellite tracking of Russian radar activity. U.S. President Trump's administration, while publicly maintaining strategic restraint, reportedly approved expanded data sharing through NATO's Joint Energy Defense Initiative. The result, near real-time target selection and damage confirmation. The domino effect extended beyond power outages. Train schedules across western Russia were disrupted. The RZD rail operator confirmed delays of over 500 freight cars due to power failures in signal systems. This slowdown rippled straight to frontline logistics in Belgorod and Kursk, where armored supply convoys had to pause overnight. A single drone strike on an electrical substation cascaded into what one DW analyst called a silent paralysis of the entire supply web. On the ground, Russian morale dipped sharply. Videos on social platforms showed residents lighting candles, cursing at the government's incompetence, and even questioning the war's purpose. Economically, the ruble slipped by nearly 1.2% that morning, as investors anticipated further infrastructure losses. The Ministry of Energy quietly ordered emergency diesel shipments from Smolensk to stabilize the grid, a move that consumed reserves meant for military fuel depots. The opportunity cost perspective here was unmistakable. Every liter burned to power civilian grids meant one less for tanks at the front. Western officials viewed Ukraine's move as a calibrated escalation. Its deterrence by punishment, explained a Pentagon energy security official to the New York Times. Kyiv isn't seeking chaos. It's teaching Moscow that energy warfare cuts both ways. The approach reflected not vengeance, but strategy make aggression unsustainable. Still, one question lingered across European capitals. If Ukraine could plunge Belgorod and Bryansk into darkness, what would happen if it reached deeper toward Moscow itself? The next phase would give that answer. Because when the lights went out in Crimea, even the Kremlin couldn't deny who struck first. By the evening of October 7, 2025, the sky over Crimea was burning. Satellite imagery from Maxar Technologies showed a massive plume stretching nearly 20 kilometers high above the Feodosia Peninsula. What had once been a logistical lifeline for Russia's Black Sea Fleet was now an inferno visible from space. Was this simply another Ukrainian counterstrike or the beginning of a deeper campaign to dismantle Russia's war machine from within? According to Reuters and Al Jazeera, the Feodosia oil transshipment terminal, one of Crimea's largest fuel depots, erupted after multiple precision strikes believed to involve Ukraine's Flamingo cruise missiles. Flames engulfed the entire complex, where fuel tanks holding up to 50,000 tons of diesel were stored. Ukrainian officials later confirmed that this facility supplied frontline armored units operating around Zaporizhzhia and Melitopol. Every drop of that fuel meant another shell fired at us, said a Ukrainian military source quoted by BBC News. From the domino effect perspective, this single strike triggered cascading failures across the peninsula. Within hours, fuel deliveries to Sevastopol's port were halted, forcing several Russian warships to remain docked. DW's maritime desk reported that the Black Sea Fleet was compelled to suspend refueling operations for 48 hours, creating the first operational standstill since spring. Civilian flights over Simferopol were delayed as the region's emergency power grid diverted electricity to firefighting efforts. A single inferno in Feodosia had set off a logistical collapse, stretching from Crimea to the southern front. Satellite data analyzed by Defense News revealed additional explosions at a nearby ammunition depot, believed to store artillery shells for the 22nd Army Corps. Western experts compared the scale of secondary detonations to the 2022 Saki airbase strike, calling this one of the costliest single-night losses for Russia's southern command. Even Russian pro-war bloggers admitted the damage was catastrophic. From an opportunity cost perspective, replacing the Feodosia terminal could cost Moscow more than $2 billion USD funds already stretched thin by wartime sanctions. Analysts at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center noted that Russia might now be forced to reroute energy shipments through the Novorossiysk corridor, adding nearly 40% to transportation costs and exposing tankers to NATO radar tracking. Every ruble spent patching Crimea's fuel infrastructure meant one less for missile replenishment or air defense upgrades. President Zelensky, addressing the nation hours later, framed the attack not as revenge, but as enforcement. "We strike military supply lines so that no Russian missile can be launched with stolen Ukrainian fuel," he declared. His statement carried an unmistakable subtext. Ukraine's new doctrine, Deterrence by punishment, was now operational. Meanwhile, the psychological shock inside Russia deepened. Footage posted on Telegram showed Crimean residents evacuating coastal towns as fireballs lit the night sky. The Guardian's defense correspondent described the scene as a moving wall of flame consuming Putin's Black Sea ambitions. In Sevastopol, naval crews reportedly spent the night manually moving warheads to prevent sympathetic detonations. The strategic contrast perspective makes the contradiction clear. Russia invaded to secure energy dominance over Ukraine. Yet it was now losing its own refueling hubs to the very weapons it had provoked into existence. Each Ukrainian strike underscored Moscow's fading grip on the peninsula it claimed as forever Russian. Yet what unfolded next on the mainland would test how far Ukraine was willing to push this advantage, and how the Kremlin would respond when the blackout spread beyond its borders. If Crimea's flames marked the turning point, what would happen when the heart of Russia itself went dark? By October 8, 2025, the shockwaves from Crimea's inferno had reached deep inside Russia. Belgorod, Bryansk, and even Tula faced rolling blackouts as emergency power grids buckled under cascading failures. Could the Kremlin still claim control when the darkness had spread this far inland? The domino effect was now unmistakable. Ukraine's strike on Feodosia had crippled the regional fuel supply chain that powered multiple Russian grid sectors. According to BBC Verify, the Feodosia pipeline network fed auxiliary stations along the Kursk-Belgorod corridor. Once destroyed, those stations lost fuel pressure, triggering automatic shutdowns. Within 12 hours, at least 4 thermal plants reported power disruptions, each dependent on diesel transferred from Crimea. DW Business estimated that nearly 10% of Russia's Western energy output went offline that night. The opportunity cost perspective deepens the story. Faced with widespread outages, the Kremlin had to make an impossible choice: repair damaged plants or keep weapons factories running. Defense News revealed that Russia temporarily halted production at the Kazan aviation plant to divert technicians and materials to rebuild the Belgorod grid. In economic terms, this meant sacrificing advanced weapon output worth hundreds of millions of dollars to keep the lights on in border cities. It was a textbook case of resource cannibalization. From the strategic contrast perspective, the contradiction was glaring. Moscow's winter campaign aimed to cripple Ukraine's morale through energy deprivation. Yet by early October, it was Russian civilians standing in food lines and lighting candles. A Reuters analysis observed Putin's war of electricity has become a war against his own grid. Western intelligence agencies noted the domestic consequences. A U.S. Department of Defense briefing confirmed by the New York Times described an unprecedented data flow of thermal anomalies detected over 20 Russian regions, evidence of systemic infrastructure strain. European Union analysts warned that if such outages persisted for more than a week, oil export volumes could fall by up to 15%. Inside, Russia frustration mounted. Social media videos showed people chanting for heat, not war in Belgorod's central square. Local officials attempted to censor footage, but clips went viral before deletion. Analysts from Al Jazeera described the mood as mutinous exhaustion, a quiet protest movement fueled not by politics, but by cold apartments and empty grocery shelves. For Ukraine, the blackout campaign was not mere retaliation, but calibration. Military Watch magazine reported that Kyiv was studying real-time grid feedback to optimize future strikes, ensuring minimal civilian casualties while maximizing strategic disruption. A senior European defense source told DW that Ukraine's engineers had achieved a level of digital precision unseen in any modern energy conflict. Meanwhile, President Trump's administration faced a balancing act. While the White House denied direct involvement, it quietly expanded intelligence sharing through NATO's Joint Electronic Defense Initiative. Analysts in Brussels framed this as the West's shadow assistance helping Ukraine strike surgically without crossing escalation thresholds. The long-term domino effect extended beyond power. As transport hubs lost electricity, Russian logistics slowed to a crawl. Freight deliveries between Moscow and Rostov dropped by 18%. Civilian air traffic diverted to secondary airports, draining precious aviation fuel. By week's end, inflation had ticked upward and the ruble weakened again. Still, Russian state media claimed that life continues normally. Yet even their broadcasts flickered as regional transmission towers failed. The illusion of control was fading fast, and analysts began asking the unthinkable: if Moscow itself went dark, what would remain of Putin's strategic deterrence? The answer arrived when Ukraine unveiled the doctrine behind its strikes, a concept that Western strategists would soon call deterrence by punishment. By October 9, 2025, Kyiv's strategy had a name and a theory behind every explosion. Deterrence by punishment. Once a term from Cold War manuals, now defined Ukraine's response to Moscow's aggression. The concept was simple: if Russia hit a Ukrainian power plant, then Russia would lose one of its own. Could this doctrine finally force the Kremlin to rethink its winter campaign? This shift was no improvisation. Reuters confirmed that Ukraine's new missile doctrine had been in quiet development since mid-2024, when Western partners began transferring real-time satellite data and radar telemetry under NATO's Joint Electronic Defense Initiative. The Flamingo long-range missile and Neptune Block II were at the center of this policy, entirely Ukrainian-made, free of Western restrictions, and optimized for deep strikes. A BBC Defense News analyst explained, "These are not random counterattacks. They are messages written in fire." Through the domino effect perspective, the doctrine aimed to create systemic paralysis rather than tactical destruction. Each Ukrainian missile hit was designed to trigger cascading disruptions across Russia's energy network. When Belgorod's thermal plant went offline, it wasn't just a local failure. It forced grid reroutes hundreds of kilometers away, draining fuel stocks from Bryansk and Kursk. Military Watch magazine compared the pattern to a silent chain reaction that makes repair more expensive than prevention. The opportunity-cost perspective revealed the deeper pain. Every Russian missile launched at Ukraine now cost more than its physical production price. It risked retaliation that consumed vital domestic resources. A leaked report cited by The Guardian estimated that Russia spent nearly $4 billion USD in October 2025 alone, replacing damaged transformers, pipelines, and fuel terminals funds, originally earmarked for defense modernization. Economists at DW Business called this the reverse weaponization of energy economics. Strategically, Ukraine's contrast could not be sharper. From the strategic contrast perspective, Russia's war goal had been to subdue Ukraine through fear and attrition, yet Ukraine's precision retaliation reframed the narrative. Instead of desperation, Kyiv projected control intelligence and moral clarity. A former U.S. Air Force analyst told Al Jazeera what Putin once sold as inevitability: Russia's energy dominance has become his greatest vulnerability. President Zelensky's latest speech, delivered just hours after the Feodosia strike, underlined this philosophy. We will not mirror brutality. We will mirror logic. Every power line they cut from us will disconnect light from their own homes. The phrasing echoed through Western capitals. Even traditionally cautious NATO members like Germany and France began exploring ways to expand non-lethal intelligence support. Meanwhile, President Trump's administration publicly reaffirmed its commitment to contain escalation while ensuring Ukraine's right to defense. Inside Moscow, however, silence replaced rhetoric. The Kremlin's briefings grew shorter, its justifications thinner. Russian military bloggers complained that air defense systems were exhausted, stretched between protecting refineries and defending air bases. The domino effect within Russia's military planning was becoming visible. To defend everywhere meant to defend nowhere effectively. Western think tanks noticed the shift. The Rand Corporation published an early October assessment calling Ukraine's campaign a live demonstration of 21st century deterrence proof that small, precise strikes can alter large strategic behaviors. It predicted that Russia's capacity for sustained offense would decline by winter's end unless it accepted negotiations or external fuel imports from Iran. Yet the question that haunted both sides was not whether deterrence by punishment worked, but whether it could stop before spiraling further. Could this calibrated pressure hold the line, or would it drag the war deeper into Russian territory? The answer would come in Zelensky's next move, an appeal not just to Russia, but to the world's conscience. By October 10, 2025, the war had entered a new phase, one fought as much in global perception as on the battlefield. Ukraine's cities stood scarred but defiant, while Russia's western regions flickered with intermittent power. At this point, Zelensky's message shifted from retaliation to persuasion. If Ukraine could endure 3 winters of darkness, what excuse did the world have for remaining dimly divided? In a televised address carried by BBC News and Al Jazeera, Zelensky declared that the era of silence is over. Pressure must come from every direction. His words marked a turning point. The Ukrainian leader was no longer addressing just Moscow, but Washington, Brussels, and the global South. Analysts from The Guardian and Defense News agreed that his timing was deliberate. U.S. President Trump had just announced new sanctions on Russian energy exports, signaling a synchronized Western front. Yet would this tightening economic vice truly change the Kremlin's behavior, or simply harden its resolve? From the domino effect perspective, Zelensky's diplomatic offensive amplified the chain reaction Ukraine had started on the battlefield. Energy markets trembled. Brent crude spiked 3% as traders feared further strikes on Russian refineries. European governments, facing their own winter pressures, rushed to secure LNG supplies from Qatar. And the U.S. NATO's Energy Security Center in Vilnius reported increased cooperation with Kyiv on grid resilience programs, proof that Ukraine's tactical blackouts were reshaping global energy diplomacy. The opportunity cost perspective exposed how unsustainable Russia's war economics had become. Rebuilding damaged power stations while maintaining offensives in eastern Ukraine demanded massive capital. DW Business estimated that Moscow was diverting up to $12 billion from its sovereign wealth fund just to stabilize domestic infrastructure. That diversion meant fewer drones, fewer replacement tanks, and delayed payrolls for regional garrisons. Each Ukrainian missile therefore cost Russia not only steel and circuitry, but political loyalty inside its own borders. Meanwhile, the strategic contrast perspective, highlighted an irony too large to ignore Russia, began this campaign, promising to keep Europe in the dark. Instead, its own citizens now queued for candles and fuel. Western analysts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies called it a reversal worthy of military textbooks, a case where aggression undermined the very strategic objective it sought to secure. Yet Zelensky's tone was careful, even restrained. Ukraine does not seek to freeze the Russian people, he said, but to unfreeze the world's will. His words resonated beyond Europe. Al Jazeera noted growing sympathy from non-aligned nations such as Brazil and South Africa, where public opinion polls showed rising support for Ukrainian sovereignty. For the first time, Ukraine's struggle was no longer just Eastern Europe's tragedy, it was a test of global order. NATO's Secretary General stated that the alliance would expand its winter logistics mission to reinforce energy infrastructure in Poland and Romania, creating what DW described as a shield for the shield. U.S. defense officials under Trump's directive approved a limited increase in reconnaissance flights over the Black Sea, signaling that Western deterrence was quietly evolving alongside Ukraine's. Still, the fundamental question remained: how long could Kyiv sustain this calibrated escalation before global fatigue set in? A senior EU diplomat told Reuters Ukraine has turned survival into strategy, but every strategy needs endurance. As the lights across Russia flickered again that night, the message from Kyiv was unmistakable: deterrence had matured into diplomacy, punishment into persuasion. But in wars defined by escalation, even diplomacy carries risk. Could Ukraine's new pressure campaign finally corner the Kremlin? Or will winter once again decide the balance of power?